So now we're going to talk about cross-sectional elements for our local streets. When you're talking about the cross-section, you're talking about establishing a center line for your profile. And you're going to have travel lanes or traffic lanes or turn lanes. You might have curb and gutter. You might have a median. And you may have parking or even a curb and gutter. So when we're typically talking about what elements are in a roadway, you're talking about the profile grade line. That's usually the center line of your road. That's where it's established, typically. Your lanes are going to be your travel lanes, whether they're 10-foot travel lanes, and that's where your car is going to be driving on. Your cross slope, which is typically a crowned cross slope, so that means the center slopes out to your curb and gutter. You also have medians, possibly it's a grassed median or it's a raised concrete median. That's just to delineate, to keep cars on each side of their sides of the road. You have curb and gutter, so it could be an actual Miami curb that you usually see in the subdivisions, or you could see a raised curb like an F curb. You can look up the DOT indexes for those different types of curbs. You have sidewalks normally required. 5 foot, 4 foot usually is the minimum, all the way up to possibly 8 foot for heavier foot traffic. Another thing that you have is utility strips. They're not anything specific, but they have in the front of yards, usually you'll find your well, maybe your electric, but like your cable, your internet provider puts their lines there. The phone company will put their lines there. Then on your larger roads, you have shoulders, which are where you pull off onto the side, and you've got side slopes that go down into ditches that don't specifically have curb or gutter. So let's take a look at what a plan and profile means. Looking down on top of it, like the plan view on Google Earth, you have a roadway through here. Now, in that roadway, there is a center line staked. This one's actually at the edge. So there's a center line. And from that center line, you have a profile, what that ground looks like. So basically what this is saying is it's going uphill at different percentages, 3%, 3.01%, 2.22%. And you also have stations, 10 plus 00, 15 plus 00, 20 plus 00. That means between here and here, there's 500 feet. 15 to 20, another 500 feet. So they're actually using it to either design or construct by. That's what these types of plans are for. Now, the cross section, the center line of that that cross section is attached to the center line of the profile. So if I say, okay, this line here actually represents this point. When we talk about cross slopes, we're actually talking about the slope away from the center line. It's usually about 2%. Okay? So in this one, we have a 12-foot travel lane, and then we have a 4-foot paved shoulder. So that means it's just additional asphalt. And then we have a 2-foot unpaved shoulder. That means it's just dirt that's been stabilized. So if you had to pull off the side of the road, then you could park there. And then you have an 8-foot swale. This is more of a rural road type design, and we also have what's called a right-of-way. That means usually a governmental entity owns that part of the road. Okay? So you have a 36-foot road section, but the entire right-of-way that the cars travel on is 52 feet. Now, we talked about super elevation before, but this is what it basically means, is you can see that the road slopes to a specific way. And the way the road slopes is based on how you're going into the curve. Always remembering that when you tie down, you always have to tie down into existing ground. You just can't stop and drop. Okay? We have a 71-foot right-of-way here, but we have a 12-foot median, so you can see this little hump here. And then you have your travel lane. You have an 11-foot travel lane, a 5-foot bike lane, and a 2.5-foot curb and gutter. And then you have a little 5-foot utility strip, possibly, and then a sidewalk. These are typically mirrored about the center line of the road. Okay? So if it's on one side, usually it's on the other. Doesn't have to be, though. But notice our right-of-way is even wider. Okay? Now, usually that grass strip is for, it's called a clear zone. So in case something happens, traffic doesn't run over anybody on the side. You also have cross sections that look like this. So you have a normal solid white line. So when somebody says solid white line, that means they're doing signage and striping. You have excuse me, a 5 or 6 foot bike lane, and then you might have parking on the side of the street, and again, a curb and gutter. Same with here. Or you could have off-street parking or no parking at all, but you still have your bike lanes. Here's another different type of example. This one's a 60-foot right-of-way. You have your travel lanes, and then you have offset lanes, maybe for a bus or something. And then you have parking on the side, and again, you have your sidewalks. Another example, but this one is your travel lanes that goes down into a rain garden. The rain garden is providing instead of putting curb and gutter and inlets, you'll have what's called a rain garden, which collects the water and does the water quality treatment on it. You also have bike lanes and even sidewalks. This is just another design. The cross section of the road is whatever you make it, but typically they include the travel lane, a bike lane, curb and gutter, and sidewalk. Okay? Now, the right-of-way widths are dictated by typically your governmental agencies, county, city, state, depending on the road that you're designing. This is more of a typical, what you'll see in a construction set of plans. It'll tell you what the risks. You can see this is actually super elevated, so you can see that it slopes across. What these little dots, and you can't really see them, but what those little dots are representing is the actual, what that material is made out of. You'll also be told what the slope is and how wide. These are the typical designs you see in a construction plan. Now here's the other thing that I want to point out. When you're designing, notice how this road, this says right-of-way, property line, right-of-way. It stops here, but notice that the ground ends over here. We have to tie back down to natural grade. And then on this side, the right-of-way stops here, but we have to tie back into natural grade. You just can't stop it, or you have to put a retaining wall if that's your design. Now on the sides over here, you don't own, the right-of-way stops, so you'll have to get a construction easement to tie back down into natural grade. Now the last part I want to talk about is the actual pavement design, what the road is. Remember when I said that the road depends on what you're using it for? Is it industrial, commercial, residential? Depending on what you're designing, gives you an idea of whether you put a friction course or seal coat on it, a surface course, a tack coat, base, subgrade, compacted grade. Typically in a subdivision you have an inch, inch and a half of asphalt, 6 inches to 8 inches of lime rock or soil cement, and then you have 12 inches of subgrade. You could also have, you've seen that on I-4 or your major highways, can actually just be poured concrete slabs over a base course. So as you go through, read the chapter about street design and take a look at the different requirements for pavement, subgrade, and base course. That's it for this section.